Well, as people join, if you want to chat, I'll get started. I have a short presentation and then just look forward to talking. But if people want to share through chat where they're located, what industry they're in, that would be great. And again, if you're up for coming, sharing your faces, it's a lot more fun to talk to faces than black squares. So it's a selfish request. So I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I was actually born in St. Louis. So this is really fun opportunity to come back home in a way. I spent the first few years of my life in the Central West End. I think before it was the Central West End. My partner is and wife and co-author and co-parent is on the faculty of Harvard Business School. We spend a lot of time helping companies who are at pivot points, usually pivot points around growth, hence the title of today's conversation. My background, originally, I was a biotech entrepreneur for about a decade. We are working on the problem of interpreting all of the data that's coming off of these sequencing machines. So we're getting very good at creating data. We're not very good still at translating that data into useful insight. And the science is still, 10 to 20 years ahead of medical practice. So was working on that problem for a while. Recently started a company in the training space called the Leadership Consortium. And we're really focused on helping. It's a big tent. We'll work with anyone, but our mission is to help women and people of color succeed in senior leadership roles. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that question. I think those are the key points. I also wrote a book about how to succeed in service industries called Uncommon Service, where we really wrestled with what does it mean to co-produce value with your customers. So delighted to talk about that question as well. But let me run through a few slides. What Francis and I, my co-conspirator, are really interested in is this question of what distinguishes good and average leaders from truly excellent leaders, particularly for entrepreneurial enterprises, mainly because I just find that 0 to 1, 2, 3 challenge just really creatively exciting and intellectually exciting, which is why it's also really fun to talk to people like you who are also really engaged in that challenge. And I'm going to walk through today as some of the key lessons that we have pulled from that work and that research, particularly around issues of trust, which are at the heart of taking any organization on any leadership journey, particularly one around growth, where you're asking so many people to take a leap of faith with you at so many points in the journey. So I'm going to share a few slides. My plan is to talk for about 20 minutes and then open it up, but please interrupt me. Please share any thoughts you have by chat or wave your hands and we will get to you. All right, let us. Can you guys all see that? Okay, great. You can find me on Twitter, probably most easily, but delighted to continue this conversation in any way. So the working definition of leadership that we use in our work is leadership is about making others better as a result of our presence and making sure that that impact endures into our absence. And somewhere along the line, we all internalized the message that a leader is the most important person in the room. And if we want to get better at this leadership thing, what we really need to do is turn inward and fix our flaws and figure out what's wrong with us and address that in some way. And what we found when we were really looking at this question of excellence is that the best leaders wake up pretty much obsessed with how to create a context where other people can thrive. And they really, as they get better, they spend more and more time thinking about other people and less time thinking about themselves and their own performance. So that's the starting point for the work that we do. How do you know if you're getting it right? The simplest way is that other people improve around you. So there are no participation trophies in this leadership game. And the people who are really crushing it are the ones who are able to create environments where people are succeeding, not just when they are actually in the room with their sleeves rolled up, but also when they're not around. And they're using tools, and this is how we organize the book, around presence and absence, but they're using tools like strategy, like culture, to guide discretionary behavior, even in their absence. What we see on a lot of teams, particularly at an early stage of an organization, is that, you know, entrepreneurial leaders are great at creating environments where people excel when they're around them, but have a harder time maintaining that momentum when they leave the room. And so what we'll do often is really focus on issues of strategy and culture, which are your big absence tools. So I'm going to dig into trust a little bit, because this is the foundation of all leadership journeys. It is, you know, it really is what enables this sacred exchange of leadership to happen. And so we went after it and wanted to understand, okay, trust is this vague kind of esoteric idea. What really creates the conditions for people to trust me in a leadership role? And we found out that there were three main pillars or drivers of trust, which are authenticity, logic, and empathy. Defined as authenticity, I believe that I'm seeing the real you. Logic, I believe that your plan is good, your logic is sound, it all makes sense. And empathy, which is that I believe that you're not just in it for yourself, but you're also in it for me. So the nice thing, and you'll see this pattern in a lot of the psychology literature, you can actually trace it back all the way back to Aristotle's writing on persuasion, logos, pathos, ethos. The beautiful thing is that, particularly if you guys are on this call, and you know, you're trusted most of the time. What's great is that when trust breaks down, this was really the exciting breakthrough for us. When trust breaks down, it tends to break down in the same way for each of us. We call that a wobble. Everyone, it turns out, has a wobble. The other thing we all have is an anchor, which is, of these three, one of them tends to be rock solid. So if you're woken up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and you're an empathy anchor, your empathy is still going to be there. When we work with leaders, and I think it was Michael who was really interested in the coaching question, we often will push people to say, okay, think back on the last few times that trust was either broken for you or you didn't get the amount of trust traction that you were hoping. So let's do it now. It's super easy exercise. If you take out a piece of paper and draw a triangle, just put A at the top, L on the bottom point, and E on the right point for authenticity, logic, and empathy. Again, think back on the last couple times where you either lost trust or were not trusted as much as you believed you should have been. Maybe you lost the sale, you didn't get the promotion, you didn't get the stretch assignment. Which of the three broke down for you? And just put a line under that letter. Now put a star next to, and you can think about it for a minute, and then put a star next to the attribute or trust driver where you are rock solid. This, it turns out, what you're looking at here is my own trust diagnostic. So I am strong on empathy, but when I wobble in trust, it usually is around authenticity. I'm just going to come off mute for a second, or come off share, and wondering if anyone would be willing to share their own trust diagnostic.
So this is Rahul. Mine resonated just very much like what you just said, Anne, is that I I think that people can figure out who I am in a snap of a second. And when I don't present my authentic self is where, can I really trust this guy comes into play. So I think I'm always spot on with empathy and with logic. It's authenticity that I have to make sure that I'm presenting my authentic self.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the places, Rahul, where this really showed up for me when I started pitching venture capitalists. And, I was ending up in a lot of the rooms where I was the only woman. I was new to the industry, and I would pretend to be this person that I thought investors wanted at the front of the room. And what it took me, 20 or 30 presentations to figure out was that, particularly at early stage investing, it is all about trust. And if I'm not bringing my real self to that conversation, then no one's going to go on that ride with me. So what I actually started doing was, the company was related to my son, and I just started putting pictures of my son into the presentation. In some cases, I wouldn't even tell people that it was my son, but it would just reminded me to be a three-dimensional human being in that room rather than pretending to be someone that I wasn't. It made a big difference. Is anyone else willing to share?
Well, I'm willing to share. Hi, Anne. So I work for startups, and one of them is a blockchain technology. So my weakness is the logic. Authenticity, it's pretty easy for me to be authentic. People can see my positivity and my enthusiasm for blockchain, but I don't have 20 years or 10 years of experience like data scientists and stuff. And I'm trying to figure out, I only know the fundamentals of what blockchain can create a social impact with, but diving in depth, that's what I have been trying to struggle with for the past few months. And when I read the book, and I'm like, it was pretty profound for me. So if you can help me with that, that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do a logic wobble right now. And if anyone's up for it, just for the fun of engagement, if you want to chat in your own wobble, we'll get a sense of the distribution on the group. But yeah, Christine, let's go right to logic wobbles. Let's see. So usually, in most cases, when people have a logic wobble, it's not that their underlying logic is actually shaky. It's that they're not communicating in a way that is inspiring confidence in their audience. So this is typical, Christine, I don't know if this is going to resonate, but this is a typical pattern. So there are two ways to communicate an idea. One of them takes your audience on a beautiful journey of twists and turns, and evidence is revealed, and there's some dramatic tension, and finally we get to the point once we've laid out the case, and there's a big reveal at the end. So this is a beautiful way to communicate. Some of the world's best storytellers, you can watch Bill Clinton speak in this way. But if logic is your wobble, that can be a dangerous way to do it, because, and the short answer is you can lose people at any point along the way before you actually reveal your idea. So what we'll coach people to do is to start with the point, and then lay out the evidence after you've given the headline in a structured way. Does that resonate at all? Yeah, so in cases where there really is something a little bit shaky about your logic, what we advise people to do is to really be thoughtful about talking within what they know. So I'm from Boston. Larry Bird is a beloved basketball player from decades ago. He was this big Celtic. One of the reasons that he was so good is he never took a shot that he knew he wouldn't miss. So there are a lot of there were a lot of, flamboyant, dramatic players who were shooting from all over the court. But what made him amazing is that he was always playing within himself. And again, if logic is your wobble, we advise people really stay within what you know, particularly in areas of inquiry, when you're getting questions on topics. That's when people often go off the rails. Make sense? Are there any empathy wobblers in the mix? So empathy wobbles are very common among people who are very analytical and motivated to learn. So if you decided to spend, an hour in this conversation at the end of the day, my suspicion is that there are empathy wobblers among us. Now, one of the places where this isn't free is a space where we're spending an increasingly amount of time, particularly in our virtual reality, which is a meeting. So what often happens with empathy wobblers is in a typical meeting, our engagement is incredibly high. We show up, we might learn something, we're leaning in, but very quickly it plummets. And it's usually at the point where we think we've gotten what we came for in this meeting, or we decided that it's not worth our time, or we contributed. There's usually a point very early on where we decided that the value of this meeting has been received in some way, and our engagement plummets. So this is very typical, and it stays that way until the meeting mercifully comes to an end. And that is the ride that so many of us are on, and now it's on Zoom all day long. And it's very easy to communicate that we're done. So there's so many beautiful nonverbal ways to communicate that we are done with a meeting. Most of them involve this object, we're looking down, we're multitasking. Everyone knows, we're not taking notes on their good ideas. The problem is that it comes at a huge cost when it comes to trust. We call this arc the agony of the super smart, or ASS, just for shorthand. And what we push people towards on this one is to figure out how to stay engaged, not through the point where you get it, but through the point where everyone in the room gets it. So figure out how to partner, if it's not your meeting, partner with the speaker to make sure, to find the resonant examples, to figure out where people are getting stuck, to figure out how to communicate in a way that everyone's going to get it. And the beautiful thing about this strategy is that the time you're spending in meetings can actually be shortened. So we've seen groups go from 2-hour standing meetings to an hour, 60-minute standing meetings to 30 minutes. It's pretty magical if you decide to stay engaged. And if nothing else, put down your phone, not just turn it over, but put it down in a way, because it is almost impossible to be present in other people's presence if you have given yourself the permission to multitask and do something else. And it is the #1 empathy killer in our modern lives. There is no faster way to communicate that you matter more than everyone else around you than by picking up your phone.
Hi, Ian, this is Doug Elliott. How are you? I'm sorry, I don't have a good screen.
No problem, Doug. We're delighted to hear your voice. Did you have a question? Oh, I think we lost you.
There I am. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So is the empathy part in these kinds of trust-centered activities, is it more process? Because I'm involved in a business model that is very transactionally oriented, we do micro investing in intellectual properties to get companies money quickly to get on to their next success stage. We have a very high algorithmic way of doing that. We pitch what our idea is. The end of a discussion and agreement as to what a technology is worth, what we would invest in it for, what we would ask for in terms of returns, is all completely transparent. So I think our authenticity is high, but we expect people to perform on what they agree to do, which is usually make a series of payments and use the funds towards a purpose, because we don't engage in them other than financing them. It's been a highly successful model that we would like to extend, but there's like no empathy in it, because we're not trying to build trust. We're trying to build a capital opportunity that companies will succeed on, because the milestones that they're using these funds for are ones that they can either do or not do. In which case, I'm not trying, I don't want to be empathetic. Empathy in our model would actually defeat our business purpose, but it's highly transactional. I want to be able to do 50 of these deals a week as opposed to one venture capital deal every year. And we think we could do it, but I don't know how empathy fits in there, or where empathy maybe needs to come into that.
Yeah. So it's, you know, the model works for organizations as well. So I'll just give you an example, and then I'll give you my suspicion, which is that there's actually quite a lot of empathy built into your business model around meeting the needs of your clients. So you have translated that into an algorithm that allows you to scale, but you have built empathy in your understanding of your customer needs very intimately into the model. So for example, we spent a lot of time working with Uber at the height of its leadership crisis. And if you look at Uber through the lens of this model, Uber had a big bad empathy wobble with almost all of its stakeholders. Drivers weren't happy, regulators weren't happy. These were very self-imposed wounds in many cases. You know, clients were, you know, customers, riders were happy because the model was built around them. But even that relationship was getting wobbly at the time we showed up. So a lot of the work that we did with the team was figuring out how to rebuild trust with all of those stakeholders. So Doug, I suspect you're building a lot of trust in the marketplace because of the empathy that's built into the model. But if you're getting stuck, I'd be curious.
My concern.
I
have a concern that we might be turning people off because we are very analytical. Yeah. I mean, we're trying to be a really high success boost for very small enterprises. That's especially acute these days with all the other stresses that are in the environment and our health. But at the same time, it's really transactional. And we do that, you know, with maybe kind of like a tough love approach. Don't take the money if you don't know what you're going to do with it. Mm-hmm. And tell us what you're going to do with it. We can factor that, and we can see whether the value of a transaction exists for you to do that and succeed on it. We want people to succeed, but if they don't succeed, there's consequences. They're all up front. Yeah. And we wouldn't do the deal unless we thought there was absolute opportunities for success, but we want the success to be with the people we do the transactions with. And so far we've been lucky, but it's not very empathetic in its presentation. It's very objective. I don't know if that's cutting us off from more deals. I'm trying to figure out how to be empathetic, but at the same time, you have to perform.
Yeah, I don't think those things are necessarily in tension. I think empathy at an organizational level is a huge opportunity right now because people are in a lot of pain. So I think there's a way to keep the bar high while also communicating your commitment to your customers and your commitment to their success. A lot of people in leadership roles, this is both true for institutions and for individuals, feel like there are tension between those two ideas of keeping the bar high and revealing commitment and devotion to their stakeholders. The sweet spot is to do both at the same time. So Doug, where I would probably push you is to figure out within the constraints of this is going to be a performance-driven model, how can you show your customers that you really get it? You really understand their lives. You really understand what they're trying to achieve with their own businesses, and you're there to partner with them. And I suspect that there are more levers.
So maybe presenting it that makes the empathy apparent, even though a lot of the discussion beyond that isn't really very empathy driven.
Yes, I would find ways to communicate empathy in the way you engage them, in the way you support, in the way you build the service support model, in even how you respond to the customers who quote unquote fail. I think there are big opportunities to lead with empathy without lowering the bar.
Well, one of the things we're trying to sell is none of our clients and our customers have failed yet. We've been doing this for 8 years now. So we'd like to say, if we think you can handle this money to do that, it's because we believe you succeed, and our track record has been, at least as far as meeting the goals of these transactions, has always worked. And so, but it's still pretty objective,
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily intention with empathy. I suspect you guys are building a lot of trust in the marketplace.
Well, thanks for those insights. That's great. Thank you very much.
Of course. Any other comments before we go on?
Hey, I'll chime in quickly if I may. Doug, I have to say, I heard a lot of empathy in your describing your interactions with your clients or your partners, however you describe them. So it might be easier than you might think at first for you to work some of that empathy language into your initial elevator pitch, or however you present to clients, not getting away from your core values and everyone understanding what it is you're trying to do, and they understand as much as you do. But even just a little bit of, for lack of a better term, lip service to it up front and, throughout the process, but bottom line is, we want, when our customers succeed, and we want you to succeed, just maybe sprinkling in a little bit throughout, I think can count. Which, and you already alluded to, but
yeah, no, I totally agree, Michael. Michael, what's your wobble?
Thank you for that.
Sure. So my wobble, I think I would say in terms of the way I communicate and the way I understand, I'm, pretty logical in the way I present myself and the way I try to understand things. Maybe empathy might be something I could maybe work on. Maybe I get too wrapped up in my own presentation, whatever it is I'm setting out to do, that maybe I could pay better attention to the person on the other side of the desk. I don't know, has anyone else experienced that?
It's super common among entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And I think there are phases of the business where it is that kind of myopic thinking can be positive. I think the trick is to turn it off once you really start growing, and dial it back and pick your head up. All right, well, let's talk about authenticity real quick, and then we can just open it up for free form discussion. So I'm going to go back to these slides for a second, if you'll indulge me. So I'm going to violate my own, let's see. Zoom's going to let me. Zoom might not let me. Let's see. Let's try one more thing and then we'll abandon this. There we go. So I'm going to come at this from a totally different angle, and I'm going to flip the triangle upside down and start with the evidence and get to the point later. But in general, authenticity wobbles really show up for us when we are in interactions that involve at least 3 people. So I'm going to compare two teams here. One is a 3-person team that is very similar, as illustrated by the fact that these 3 circles are the same size and right on top of each other, compared to what we call a diverse team, or a team that is has difference embedded in it in some way. So if we manage these teams in the exact same way, then essentially this is what you get in terms of the knowledge that you can access with the team. And it's caused by something called the common information effect, which is that as human beings, we tend to gravitate towards the things we have in common. And so left to our own devices, we get to a very sad place, which is that the homogeneous team is outperforming the diverse team because there is just more shared knowledge that they can use to compete and perform. However, if you create an environment where authenticity can flourish, we'll call that an inclusive team, then the inclusive team will thump all of the other teams because, in fact, you have access to more knowledge. The problem is that it's not easy to do. So we spend a lot of time talking and thinking and researching what it means to actually create an environment where authenticity can flourish. And we use this simple framework, which we call the inclusion dial. It is progressive. You can't really get to the upper levels here until you start with the basics. And the basics are, first, people have to feel safe. It has to be an atmosphere free of physical and psychic threats. People have to feel welcome in spite of who they are. They have to feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. But where it gets really interesting is at the upper edges of this dial, which is that people feel celebrated, not in spite of who they are, but because of who they are, where their unique perspectives and experiences are really valued. And this is where, inclusion really becomes a competitive advantage, and organizations really start seeing the return on their investment in not just diverse teams, but inclusive teams. And the headline is that diversity is not going to be useful to you until you can get to a place of true inclusion where you are accessing all of the difference among you. And on some level, we're all bringing difference to the table, and organizations win when they create spaces where that difference can really be accessed and ultimately celebrated. Cherished is a place where you can really do it at scale. So what we really push for on the authenticity front is to create the conditions for the full humanity of other people to show up. And then if you are an authenticity wobbler, and authenticity wobblers are disproportionately underrepresented human beings in environments, to really find ways to tap into the courage to show up even in environments where you may not yet be celebrated or cherished. All right, I'm gonna stop there and let's open it up for a discussion. Questions, comments, thoughts? Christine, I know you have a list of questions, and we'll see if anyone else wants to jump in before you do.
I've got one.
Erica, talk to me.
Hi. So when you said, what's your wobble before, I sat there, and it's difficult for me to understand what my wobble is. I think I have to ask other people, perhaps. But I came up with a question, which is, can you be too authentic? Because I wonder sometimes if my wobble is that I share too much sometimes, and maybe even to the point where my authenticity impacts people's perception of my logic. I don't know. So what do you think? Can you be too authentic sometimes?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and we get it sometimes. I think the short answer is yes, when your authenticity is in tension with the other points on the circle. And so if it starts to threaten your logic, or it starts to threaten your awareness of other people because there's too much energy going towards your own experience, then I think that's where you bump up against the boundaries of authenticity being useful to you in a leadership context. And I just want to stress that.
Yes.
Like, go home and fly your freak flag and, you know, be your amazing multicolored self. But when you're building trust in the workplace, just make sure that it doesn't threaten those two other points on the triangle.
Yeah, and it's funny because Rahul and I have worked together, and I'm pretty sure he's seen me fly my freak flag at work. But I think maybe that's what it is for me then. If it's possible to kind of do too much authenticity, then I think that's my wobble.
I have a related question. And what if your wobble isn't what you think it is, right? So I started the conversation with, okay, I think my wobble is authenticity. That's my self lens. How do you determine from other lenses what your wobble may be?
Go bring your working hypothesis to somebody that you love and who knows you well, and they will tell you if you have diagnosed yourself correctly. And we find that in about 20% of cases, people's initial assessment is wrong. So it's definitely worth doing.
Thank you.
And are there people who don't have a wobble who are just very genuinely trustworthy most of the time?
You know, we haven't found, you know, it's kind of like the practice of leadership is about mastery. Nobody excels all of the time, which is part of why it's fun, because there's always room for improvement. We have not met anyone who doesn't have a wobble when they really push themselves to look at the pattern over the course of their lives. What's interesting is it can be situational. You know, people can have an authenticity wobble at work and an empathy wobble at home, and that's that kind of thing is super common. But what can be helpful is it creates a way to have those conversations. Like any tool like this, it gives you a vocabulary to go and talk to the most important relationships in your life about the relationship, which is some of the most powerful conversations you can have. So even if you're confident in your wobble, my advice would be to talk to a loved one about it, because it can lead to some really interesting dialogue. And the dialogue alone can build trust, because it's a very authentic communication.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, knowing Rahul, I couldn't figure out what his wobble was, and that's what prompted the question. I was like, maybe he doesn't have a wobble.
Rahul maybe the one exception. It's possible. Seems like a very trustworthy guy.
When he said authenticity, I was like, no way, no.
Same here.
We're talking after this, Erica.
So beyond the presentation, I am pretty much like, trust is essential for leadership capital. So if you want to define leadership, because some people haven't read your book, how can you share that with the audience?
Yeah, I went through it super fast at the beginning of the presentation, so I'm going to take this chance to say it again. But it's the way we define it is that leadership is about making others better, full stop. Like, that's it. And then, you know, if we double click on it, it's about doing it not only when you are present, but also when you're absent. So the way we divide the book up is into presence and absence chapter, and presence is about trust. It's about what we name love, somewhat provocatively, but that is about creating a context of high standards and deep devotion, which is where human beings tend to thrive, and belonging, which is creating an environment where everyone can bring their just complete range of skills and capacities into the workplace. So those are the main levers you have as a leader in your presence. And then in your absence, it's about strategy and culture. So, and again, those are the tools that you have to guide discretionary behavior for people you will never meet in some cases, people on the front lines, people who you may have minimal interaction with. And as a team grows beyond these early entrepreneurial stages, those tools become even more critical.
All right, thank you, Anne, for sharing. Any other questions in the audience?
I got a question. So it's trust is obviously the center of this. How do you approach like different levels within an organization? So I've noticed so there can be like this like leadership dynamic on an individual level, whether with peers or people around your group. And then as you grow into an organization, there's different levels where you have to, hit different needs of the different, users or your clients. So what are your thoughts with the different levels within an organization and how to communicate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, a big part of mastering the practice of leadership, and we talk about it as a practice. It is a verb, right? It is something you choose to do or not do. It's not that there are leaders and non-leaders. It's really about, as the organization grows, it's really about scale, and how do you scale that leadership? Some of the principles we've talked about apply, at every level. You just embed them in different activities. So trust is an example, where it's relevant to the relationship you have with a single colleague, but you also have to build trust at the level of team, at the level of organization, and at the level of brand. And you have to embed it into culture. So actually the way we wrote the book was around this question of scaling. And as you get bigger and have an ambition to influence more and more people, again, then things like creating a culture where people can thrive become critical to what you think about as a leader. When you have a founding team of 4 people, you don't have to worry about culture, because you're just you're in the same room and you solve problems in real time. There's no ambiguity. Strategy is, what you decide to do and not do on a daily basis. But as you get bigger, you need a coherent strategy that you communicate in an accessible and coherent way, so that it's useful to people who can't come to you and ask clarifying questions when they're figuring out what to do with their time. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
So, question, how can this process work when one of the things you may be trying to sell is a really counterintuitive process or concept to the way things are done, as opposed to sailing into these great, let's say, dark, unknown opportunities? We just have to shine a spotlight there. What about counterintuitive ideas, ones that say, I think we're sailing this boat in the wrong direction. If we turn around, we'll get there faster. Understanding if it's on a globe, the shorter distance may be the opposite, you're actually traveling. Because counterintuition puts a lot at risk, right? It says, everything you believe is wrong. You really should look at it this way, and then you try and sail against those headwinds. Is there ways to build trust, or is that a different environment in which to build trust? Because right now, with as many stressors as we have, just trying to survive on conventional wisdom is not looking like a really great idea. But going counterintuitive probably sounds like madness, but it may be precisely the time to be counterintuitive. So everyone wants to get big. I said, no, I want to be incredibly successful, very small. How do I do that? And really profitable. And you're an idiot. You want to basically shrink down, but be profitable. What's wrong with you? You can't do it that way. And so I'm wondering, in these things, you're starting basically with I think probably a madness wobble at that point. And I'm just kind of curious how you found to field that, because I'm sure in your very illustrious career, you must have seen a couple of counterintuitives that nonetheless might have proved to be the right way to go.
Yeah, I think it's this is a really interesting moment that we're all living through, in the sense that there's incredible uncertainty. And so there's a human impulse to hold on more tightly to the things that we know. But simultaneously, I think all of these assumptions have been blown up very, very quickly about how we work, about how we collaborate. And so I think, well, the short answer is I think that trust matters now more than ever because people are hungry. I think people are in motion and know that they need to change and they know they have to solve problems, but they're also willing more than ever before to give up previous assumptions and to challenge conventional wisdom. The conventional wisdom has brought us all to a pretty unsatisfying place, I would say. So I think your business is positioned to have a really exciting conversation with people, and that hearts and minds are open like never before to revisit old ways of working, and old ways of funding, and explore new relationships. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I'm very optimistic that we have a marketplace that is open to your message, Doug.
Well, I know that we've never done as well as we're doing now. But it's really going the opposite direction. We're trying to figure out how small a transaction we can do because we can mass process them for creative properties. Normally those two things don't seem like they go together, but in certain algorithms, all creative properties are fundamentally the same by their attributes. And so we want to be doing 2-3 deals a week. And we want to teach other people how to do them with us because our process has been working. And there's tons of opportunities out there. You know, the thing is, you only have maybe a half dozen billion-dollar unicorns, but you have probably $500,000 to $5 million opportunities. And those things are valuable. And if you focus your investment, you take the same kind of tools you've kind of used for big picture, and then you go down to the atomic scale, and there's just as many interesting things to make that are useful. But you have to follow the scale.
It's a huge gap in the marketplace, Doug. It's a huge gap in the marketplace. So I know you say you're not shining a light on the new space, but nobody has been able to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. And it's at a time when people aren't willing to leverage themselves up, because who knows what the world's going to look like? Who knows what the world's going to look like in 6 weeks, right? And so that you've built a business around accommodating that uncertainty, and the smaller businesses and their true appetite for risk. I mean, back to Michael's empathy point, I think you revealed tremendous empathy. And I think you're in a really exciting place.
Yeah, but don't forget to be profitable in the process of doing it. Now you see, there's the lack of empathy again. But it's a form of...
That's your logic. That's logic. The business is not sustainable if you can't generate a profit.
Yeah, I'd like to share it. I mean, it's patented. It's got all kinds of stuff. Nobody believes it. Everyone tells us we're nuts for doing it. But none of our deals seem to fail, and they're small, but we can do tons of them because there's just a lot more ordinary, extraordinary opportunities than there are, cosmic opportunities. So,
for sure,
we're looking at the
and
ordinary.
There's no question that the unicorn chasing cosmic opportunity VC world is broken.
It's dead.
It's totally dead. It does not work.
Well, it's a suicide pact. You're taking the scarcest resource now and wanting to pile it up in one single bet. It's like nuts.
Totally.
It's like it's like taking your family savings and going down to Belmont. I'm going to bet on this one horse, this one race, and we're going to make it or we're not.
Totally.
But if we do, it'll be great.
Yeah, I agree. So, Doug, if you want to chat your website or information about your company for the group. I'm sure
Well,
people would love
I'll
to.
stick it. I can stick it in the chat. You know, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
an
sure
ugly, it's an
people would love
ugly website. Let me tell you that. You really have got to be needing to get something to get through this. This is the worst piece of not a good website that you'll ever come across. We're trying to fix it actually, but we find that our story. Everyone says we're nuts. The venture capitalists hate our model
Of course
because
they
we
do.
don't want to take any equity. They
Of
said
course
we
they do.
won't take any equity. We refuse to take equity. What do
So
you
Doug,
do?
maybe
What do you
that's
do when madmen like that are running around the world?
maybe
I
that's
want
a place
your equity.
to channel your empathy is fix your website so that
Yes.
people can learn about your business.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. So I know we're running out of time, but I really appreciate you guys showing up at the end of the day to talk about the things that I care about. If there's anything I can do to be helpful to anyone, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. The book is Unleashed.
It's right here. I got the book.
Ah, Erica, nice.
Everybody's got, yes, show your
Yeah,
book,
it's
Erica.
beautiful. The book is fun. We tried to
We
make
work
it
with
fun.
Fortune 500 companies, and I'm a consultant with them. I give them information and find out what's wrong with the company and how it should work better. I'm a doctor of philosophy.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I love it.
Was I
Good. Well,
talking to somebody there?
hopefully our musings are useful to you as well. It sounds like the bar is high. We'll see if we can get over it. Yeah.
If I can get back on. Trying to get back on.
So Anne, I have to tell you, and for those who haven't read the book, not only is it, very, very insightful, but it's also very funny. And I have a list of, on the back page, awesome footnotes throughout the book that just made me chuckle. So you guys, there's hidden humor in here too.
Am I in this event here?
Thank you, Erica.
Thanks.
Nothing makes us happier. I think maybe we ended up with about 20 footnotes. We tried to make you laugh with every footnote. Know that there were another 20 to 30 that ended up on the cutting room floor because they were inappropriate.
Yes.
I think you guys should publish those somewhere else.
So maybe we'll recover the footnotes and get them out there somehow. Yeah.
I vote yes.
Awesome. Well, this was such a selfish pleasure. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you, Christine, for hosting me.
It's such an honor to have you here and giving an hour to share what you guys written. This is your second book, and you and Francis Fry have been very instrumental to my journey through leadership, and Erica's, and hope Rahul too. So it was lovely to have you here, and I wish you all the best and safety and health and abundance for your two sons, and Rosie and Francis Fry. So if anybody who wants to buy the book, I put the link on the chat. So please do. I highly recommend it. It's Ariana Huffington says it's the definitive guide to leadership today.
If Ariana said
it says, yeah, you have to buy it. So thank you, Anne. You have a lovely afternoon, and thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you.
Lovely.
This was amazing.
Thank you,
very
Anne.
much.
Thank you,
and
Christine, for organizing.
There's an open request for Doug's
Yes.
company link. If Doug, if you want to provide that, I'm sure people would love to learn more about your business.